I grew up with Homer. I mean, I was in Hamburg, Germany, where I grew up. I was at school where we learned actually ancient Greek and Latin. So I actually read Homer's work in the original ancient Greek language. So I was very close to it, very familiar. And I loved Achilles. I thought it was really good. And of course, you had this kind of, oh, wow, this sort of admiration for Homer as the greatest poet of all time, and the Iliad, maybe the greatest story ever written. So later on, get the chance to do a film about it. I think you have at least some mixed feelings about being a little bit intimidated by all that. On the other hand, it's not something remote and strange for me. I knew it very well. There was so much excitement when we were shooting this film about doing something what is for a filmmaker and for actors, I think, always the best. If you can have a great event, a great, spectacular, visually stunning, amazing film, that's always great. You know, when you go to the movies, you want to, wow, you want to see something what just takes your breath away. At the same time, though, you just tell an amazing story and really strong actors and bigger than life characters, heroes, cowards, everything. Homer and the Iliad, they have it all. If you streamline a story, and Homer's story is like a universe, so many more layers and characters and all, you cannot just deal with everything. You have to streamline it and also make some choices that a lot of people really were a little bit angry about. I mentioned it right away, so it's out of the way, that we killed Agamemnon is absolutely not Homer. I do it because I think an audience will not be happy. If we go with a version that's more known, that Agamemnon survives, and at the end he's being killed by his wife in the bathtub or so, I think it's not very satisfying. The main thing about this version is that we don't have here the fact that we added all kind of storylines that were not there. That's not so much. It's more subtle. I will give you an example. In the very beginning, we see now, and that's very different than the film in the theaters, is we start the scene with an empty valley and we see this poor dog looking for his master. I always liked it. It wasn't in the script like that, but we never used it before. I liked it that because it said so much about the tragedy of the whole situation. Poor dog looking for his master. He sniffs around, there's no master. He finds some bloody remnants of obviously a fierce battle. And then finally he sees the crows up there and finds the dead master, and he licks him and he's whining a little bit. And then he looks up and hears already the dreaded stomping foot again of, you know, that means the next battle is coming. I like it. No words, nothing, but it says sort of everything about the insanity of this all and the tragic tone. Also, when you then shoot a film with a superstar like Brad Pitt, that is his own set of interesting things, let's put it that way. Paparazzi wherever you go. We were somewhere out there. First day when we shot with Julie Christie and Brad Pitt, we said we go to an island even away from Malta with little boats. We went there. It's so remote and so beautiful, so blue water there. It's amazing. And we shot the scene there. And Brad came to me and said, have a look there, over there. There's another tiny island like a few miles away or a mile away or something like that. Do you see these glints there? I said, no, I don't see that. You know, they're paparazzi because he's so used to that. I don't know how they even got there. But obviously, he was right because the next day or two, there was a spread of 4 or 6 pages in one of these London papers. All these problems and drama you have when you shoot a big movie like this. One big concern was when Achilles, Brad Pitt, really injured his foot. And we shot, actually, when it happened, the beginning, the fight against this giant, when he jumps up and kills him. That was shot toward the end of the whole shoot. You see when he jumps up so high and lands, he really hurt his foot very badly. And shortly after that, the hurricane came and took that set away, and we had to stop production anyway because he still had to do his big fight with Hector. He had to go back to Los Angeles, and then he was in a cast for a long time. It was very hurtful and didn't heal. I think he was out of commission for like 3 months. And then he came back in December. We shot the fight, and he was okay, and we could do it. And the fight is, I think, it's one of the great fights I've ever seen. And everything what they did in the fight, what you see there, are themselves. There's no doubles, nothing. They really trained hard. I think they trained for at least 6, 8 months just for this fight. Really well done. Helen, for me, I really wanted to have somebody who is unknown. She's living there in Sparta, and all rumors about she's so beautiful and so, but of course nobody has seen her because there was no television that time, no newspapers. I want to have the same thing, like all these rumors about Helen and so, who is Helen when they go to see the movie, to present somebody who they have not seen, has no baggage of all the other roles that she had played. So we did a worldwide search. I think we looked at 3,000 different actresses around the globe, and finally popped up this one test with Diane Kruger, what she did herself. And I thought, wait a moment, there's something here. Let me see. She's good. I invited her and made a second test with her in England. And that finally made it for me. Then I invited her to come to Hollywood and did another test with her, with costume already, with proper makeup, with lights and a real film camera, and showed that to the studio. And they were kind of still, I don't know, nobody knows her, and say, that's the good news. Nobody knows her.
Before you came to Sparta, I was a ghost. I walked in the Aid and I swam in the sea, but I was a ghost.
An interesting thing about Agamemnon, so he's not just sort of just a bad guy. He sees himself as a very modern type who is able to unite that first big empire. It sounds good what he says, but it's also a lot of like personal gain and power, greed involved in that. But on the other hand, he says Achilles is just a guy from the past. I mean, he only thinks about his own glory and doesn't see more or less the big picture of politics, what you should do. I think Achilles sees it right through. At the end of the day, it's not so much a modern strategy to save the world. I think he sees it's indeed for Agamemnon more like pure power greed, and he wants to be the king of all kings and has the biggest power of them all. It all sounds very often when our politicians speak, oh, it's so great and so wonderful, and what the real motivation is, very often it's very clear. And I think in this case with Agamemnon, it's pretty clear, and Achilles sees it. And in that sort of conspiracy scene there between Agamemnon and Nestor, when they talk about they want to go and gather all the ships and attack Troy, Agamemnon indicates that would be a great opportunity for him to finally get Troy. He doesn't care so much about the problem that his brother has with his wife, but it's for him, it's a great opportunity to finally get that Troy that is so important for him, the last sort of stone and the whole mosaic of his empire. But Nestor, who knows very well what's going on and is a very smart man, he says, you will not ever do it because that's Hector and Troy unless you have Achilles. And that's something what Agamemnon really hates the idea. But he's kind of forced into it by the necessity, and he knows, and Nestor saying you have to do it because he's a born killer. If you want to win this battle against Troy, then you need Achilles. We know from the very beginning of the movie how antagonistic these two men are. We know we are in for something now when he reluctantly agrees to send somebody like Odysseus to Achilles to hire him for this job. This is the man that Achilles truly cannot stand. I mean, he doesn't like his pompous behavior, his way of using people just to get more power and finally conquer all of Greece. All that is completely against the philosophy, the grain, and the humanity of Achilles. And vice versa, Agamemnon cannot stand him because he is not used to find anybody out there who criticizes him as much as Achilles and is so arrogant and cocky with him. We feel the jealousy and the anger of Agamemnon towards Achilles much stronger, and vice versa as well. I'm very proud of this cut, that especially this relationship is really now there and hitting hard and very interesting. Odysseus, the character for Sean Bean, wonderful actor. We could not introduce him properly in the film because it was another scene of 2 minutes or so, and we didn't have the time. So now the scene is there when he's sitting there on the hillside with his dog. It's a character that do now understand why Achilles, this fierce, distant fighter, likes him and has a relationship to him, because he comes across in that new scene as what he actually is, a fun guy, a human being, a lot of humor, and not all about power. And like Agamemnon, he's a good guy. And now the relationship between him and Achilles works so much better because of that introduction scene. Location selecting and all that was pretty much of a nightmare, very difficult, because we needed Mediterranean areas. I was asked often if I go to Greece maybe or to Turkey. That time it was considered dangerous to go there because of the very political tension in that whole area. And also the infrastructure for making big movies is not really there. We wanted to go to Malta, what we did. Malta is very close to the African coast, very close to Sicily. And then we thought Morocco was a good place to go for the look of the beaches and the sand. Then the whole political situation with the Iraq war, we had to cancel that. We couldn't shoot there. The whole company had to move then to Mexico instead, around Cabo San Lucas. And that was easier said than done because there are not so many places who are really a Mediterranean look and feel to it, where you can hire also extras who, from their skin tone and so, would also look Mediterranean, and climate is okay. In that case, also closer to Los Angeles, what helps with, as you can imagine, with the logistics and everything. So Mexico was good. I mean, the problem with Mexico was we had not this enormous, gigantic battlefields for 100,000 people doing a battle, because it doesn't exist in Mexico. So in our desperation, we had then to say, but when we have to create it, we have to cut all these bushes and trees in an enormous section. And we got the permission for that, to do that, if we, after we've done, plant it all back in. In both places, it was extremely hot. If you would have known how, right before the scene starts, everybody, the actors, look like, with towels all over them, you know, with cold water, and their feet in ice buckets with water, because it was unbelievable hot. If you look at one scene when Peter O'Toole greets Helen for the first time on the steps of his palace, that day, we read a newspaper from England, Malta was the hottest spot in the world. I thought Peter O'Toole would fall down any second, and if you look at that, he looks fine, he looks okay. But wait when the camera stops, right back into the bucket, and back into the ice and everything, and it was really hard. And then on top of it, at the end in Mexico, the entire wall of Troy in a hurricane was ripped apart.